The night was calm over the Caspian Sea. Waves lapped gently against the docks of a remote port city, their rhythm broken only by the occasional call of seagulls circling in the dark. For the workers on duty, it seemed like any other evening. Another shipment, another vessel unloading cargo under the cover of darkness. But on this particular night, something was different. Something was wrong. A massive cargo ship, painted in neutral colors and registered under a name meant to deflect attention, had slipped quietly into port. To most, it was just another steel giant carrying industrial equipment, but to a select few, the intelligence operatives watching from satellites above, and the port officials bribed into silence, it was something far more dangerous. Inside the ship's steel containers lay one of the Kremlin's most sought-after war assets: Iranian-made drones, Shade series drones, precision loitering munitions, designed to hunt, stalk, and destroy. They had already made headlines in Ukraine, raining down on cities, shredding power grids, and instilling fear in civilians. Now, another massive batch was arriving, meant to replenish Russia's depleting stockpile. But the shipment would never reach its destination, because just hours after docking, the Caspian night would erupt in fire, steel, and thunder, leaving Russia humiliated, Iran embarrassed, and the world asking, what exactly happened in that port? The story begins weeks earlier, in the deserts of Iran. Satellite imagery had revealed convoys of trucks moving crates toward Bandar Anzali, Iran's main port on the Caspian. Intelligence sources whispered of a massive new deal: Russia, desperate for drones, paying in oil, gold, and even advanced fighter jet technology. For Iran, it was not just a business transaction, it was a geopolitical gamble, openly defying Western sanctions to arm Moscow in its grinding war. For days, preparations continued in secrecy. Iranian handlers inspected each crate, while Russian officers supervised with clinical precision. Every box carried carefully packed drones, folded wings, electronic modules, explosives, and spare parts. These were not simple machines, they were weapons of modern hybrid warfare. Then, one night, the cargo ship was loaded. Massive cranes swung containers into place, steel locking against steel. On the manifests, the crates were labeled as agricultural equipment and machinery parts. In reality, the ship carried death. The journey north across the Caspian was quiet. No one spoke of the cargo. The crew kept to themselves, while shadowy security officers ensured silence. But beyond the horizon, eyes were watching. Satellites traced every nautical mile. Western analysts whispered of an opportunity, and somewhere in Ukraine, military planners debated, should this shipment be stopped before it fuels another wave of strikes?
When the ship finally arrived at the Russian-controlled port, everything seemed smooth. Dock workers, most of them unaware of what they were handling, began the routine process of unloading. But as cranes lifted container after container, whispers began to spread among those who knew the truth. This wasn't normal cargo. This was something too big, too dangerous, too politically sensitive. And then, at precisely 2:17 a.m., everything changed. A deafening explosion tore through the night sky. Witnesses later described it as a thunderclap from the heavens. The cargo ship shook violently as fire erupted from its belly. Within seconds, flames engulfed the deck. Containers split open like toy boxes, their contents thrown across the pier. The port descended into chaos. Workers screamed, running for cover. Some threw themselves into the dark waters to escape the firestorm. Sirens wailed as emergency crews rushed to the scene, but the blaze was too powerful, too sudden. And in the middle of it all, the drones. Witnesses reported seeing half-destroyed wings, charred fuselages, and shattered electronics scattered across the ground. The prized shipment, worth millions, had been reduced to smoking wreckage in an instant. What caused the explosion? That question would haunt Moscow for weeks. Eyewitnesses told conflicting stories. Some swore they saw a missile streak across the sky seconds before the blast. Others insisted it was an accident, perhaps poor handling of volatile munitions inside the containers. A few believed it was sabotage, carried out by unseen hands determined to humiliate Russia. Local fishermen claimed they saw strange lights in the sky, drones circling above just moments before the eruption. But authorities quickly silenced them. Videos taken by dock workers mysteriously vanished from social media, replaced by official statements blaming a technical malfunction. But the truth, as always, was far more complicated. In Moscow, the Kremlin was furious. Russia had counted on this shipment to sustain its drone strikes in Ukraine. Now, not only was the cargo gone, but the blast had publicly exposed their reliance on Iranian weapons. The illusion of strength had been shattered. For Tehran, the embarrassment was equally severe. Their prized drones, meant to prove Iranian military prowess, had instead become a symbol of failure. Rumors spread that Iranian engineers had been present on the ship, and that some may have perished in the blast. Internationally, the reaction was explosive. Western officials hinted, without admitting, that the incident was not an accident. Ukrainian intelligence sources celebrated cryptically, suggesting that those who bring death will sometimes meet it themselves. And across social media, the images spread like wildfire: burning steel, shattered drones, and smoke rising over the Caspian night. The Caspian blast was not just an accident. It was a message, but who sent it? Ukraine, Western operatives, internal saboteurs within Russia itself? Or had the arrogance of Moscow and Tehran led to their own undoing? The answers lie in a tangled web of geopolitics, betrayal, and shadow warfare, where every move is a signal, and every explosion carries a hidden meaning. And as the world watched, one thing became clear: the collapse of this shipment marked a turning point. The war had spilled into new arenas. The Caspian was no longer safe. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The Caspian Sea had always been Moscow's quiet backyard, a relatively safe corridor, isolated from NATO presence and international shipping lanes. Russia used it for years as a discreet logistics artery. From here, convoys of cargo ships moved weapons, oil, and now drones, out of sight from the west. But the explosion at Astrakhan changed everything. The Iranian Shahed drones, the backbone of Russia's terror campaign against Ukrainian cities, were supposed to be untouchable in transit. Packed in sealed crates, they were loaded onto a cargo vessel disguised as carrying civilian equipment. Yet, in the early hours of dawn, a fireball ripped through the ship. Eyewitnesses from nearby docks described a deafening roar, followed by a mushrooming inferno. "The ground shook," said a fisherman who was moored just half a mile away. "At first, we thought it was an earthquake. Then we saw the black smoke rising into the sky. Within minutes, Russian emergency crews flooded the port. The blaze, however, proved uncontrollable. Shipyard cranes toppled, containers burst open, and twisted wreckage rained down onto nearby warehouses. For hours, fire brigades fought in vain to contain the inferno. By dawn, the cargo ship was nothing more than a smoldering skeleton, its contents lost forever. Moscow scrambled to explain. State media first reported a mechanical malfunction. Then, they shifted to blaming careless welding work by dockyard staff. But independent videos told another story. Clips filmed by terrified workers showed flashes consistent with secondary explosions, munitions detonating from within the cargo. Some even captured what looked like the remains of Shahed drone wings scattered across the pier. Almost immediately, whispers began circulating. Could this have been sabotage? Western intelligence agencies remained tight-lipped.